The Galactic Concord had watched humanity for 30 years before they made first contact. Their long-range probes had recorded everything. The wars, the famines, the nuclear bombs that turned cities into ash, the plagues that killed millions. And through it all, the humans kept going. They refused to die. When humanity finally built ships fast enough to reach other stars, the Concord welcomed them carefully. It was like inviting a wolf to a dinner party. Everyone smiled, but nobody turned their back. Ambassador Valthari of the Syndicate sat in her office and read the reports about humans for the 100th time. Her species had 4 eyes, and right now all of them were wide with worry. Humans were listed as Category 7. This was a special classification. It meant they were a species that had reached space travel, even though they had tried to destroy themselves many times. Most species that dropped nuclear weapons on their own cities did not survive long enough to build starships. Humans had done it anyway. Their soldiers were already famous across the galaxy. During the fringe disputes 5 years ago, a single company of human infantry had defended a mountain ridge against 2,000 Kreth warriors. The Kreth were considered one of the finest warrior species in known space. They stood 8 feet tall and had 4 arms, each one strong enough to crush metal. The battle lasted 11 days. The humans ran out of food on day 3. They ran out of medical supplies on day 5. They ran out of ammunition on day 7 and started fighting with knives and rocks and their bare hands. On day 11, reinforcements finally arrived. They found the humans still holding the ridge. 200 Kreth bodies lay in the valley below. The surviving humans were wounded, starving, and exhausted. But they were alive. And they were still fighting. The Concord military experts had studied the battle. They ran computer simulations 1,000 times. Every simulation said the humans should have died on day 2. The computers called the survival statistically impossible. The humans just called it a rough week. Valthari closed the report and rubbed her eyes. If regular human soldiers could do that, what else were they hiding? She had heard rumors, whispers about special units that humanity never talked about. Soldiers so dangerous that even other humans feared them. But these were just stories. Nobody had ever seen proof. She hoped she never would. 3 months later, everything changed. The first reports came from the outer rim. A massive fleet had appeared from beyond the edge of known space. They called themselves the Hegemony of Silence. Their ships were black as midnight and moved without sound. They did not ask for trade or friendship. They simply conquered. The Hegemony had ruled their part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had destroyed hundreds of species and enslaved thousands more. They believed it was their divine right to rule all intelligent life. And now they had found the Concord. Valthari watched the war reports with growing horror. The Hegemony's advance fleet alone numbered 500 ships. They swept through the border systems like fire through dry grass. 3 Concord species lost their homeworlds in the first month. Millions died. Millions more were taken as slaves. The Concord Council met in emergency session. 12 species gathered to discuss survival. Their combined fleets numbered 2,000 ships. It was not enough. The Hegemony had more ships, more soldiers, and technology that the Concord scientists could not understand. Admiral Yanara of the Vela spoke the words nobody wanted to say. Her blue skin had gone pale with fear. We cannot win this war. We can only delay the end. The council fell silent. Some ambassadors wept. Others sat frozen in shock. The Concord had stood for 1,000 years. Now it would fall. Then the human ambassador stood up. Her name was Shen Weilin. She was small compared to most species in the room. She had no claws, no armored skin, no natural weapons at all. But when she spoke, everyone listened. The Concord has been good to humanity, she said. You welcomed us when you could have feared us. You traded with us when you could have isolated us. You gave us a chance." She paused and looked around the room. "Now we would like to return the favor." Admiral Yanara leaned forward. "What can you offer? Your fleet is strong, but not strong enough to change the outcome." Chun Wei-Lin smiled. It was a strange smile, soft and sad and somehow terrifying. "We would like permission to deploy our Tier 1 assets." The council murmured in confusion. They did not understand the term. What are Tier 1 assets? Valthari asked. The human ambassador was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They are what we keep in reserve. What we use when regular soldiers are not enough. When survival is not just important but mandatory." She met Valthari's eyes. "We call them our Special Operations Forces. Our elite. The ones we send when failure is not an option." "How many soldiers are we talking about?" Admiral Yanara asked. "That depends on the mission. Sometimes 100. Sometimes a dozen, sometimes." Chun Wei-Lin paused. "Sometimes just one." The Admiral made a sound that was almost a laugh. "One soldier? Against an empire that has conquered half a galaxy?" "You do not understand," the human said quietly. "These are not regular soldiers. They are not like anything you have seen before. They train for years before they earn the right to call themselves operators. Most who try do not survive the training. Those who do become something more than human." She stood straighter. "They have never failed a mission. Not once in 200 years." The council was silent. Valthari felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard stories about human soldiers. But this was something else entirely. "What do you need from us?" she finally asked. "Only permission," Chun Wei-Lin said. "And a promise." "What promise?" The human ambassador's smile faded. Her eyes became hard as stone. "Promise that you will not interfere with their operations. Do not ask questions. Do not demand explanations. Let them do what they do best." She paused. "And whatever you see, whatever you witness, do not be afraid. They are on your side." The council agreed. They had no other choice. 3 days later, humanity began deploying forces that the galaxy had never imagined. The Concord had feared humanity for 30 years. They had worried about human soldiers and human weapons and human aggression. They had been afraid of the wrong things. The regular human military was just the surface. Just the part that humanity let the galaxy see. Beneath that surface lay something far more dangerous. Something that humanity had spent centuries perfecting. The galaxy was about to meet humanity's true warriors, and nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Yanara stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the human transport dock with her vessel. She commanded the Concorde's combined fleet. 400 warships from 12 species. It was the largest military force assembled in 100 years. It was also probably not enough to stop the hegemony. The human liaison had informed her that a small support element would be joining the defense of the Verith system. She had expected at least a battalion, maybe a brigade, perhaps a few thousand soldiers with their strange weapons and terrible reputation. Instead, 12 humans walked off the transport. Yanara stared at them. They did not look like monsters. They did not look like the demons that stories described. They looked like ordinary humans. Some were tall. Some were short. Some had dark skin, and some had light. They carried equipment bags over their shoulders and moved with an easy, relaxed confidence. Their leader approached her. He was a weathered man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands. His uniform had no decorations except a simple patch on his shoulder. It showed a skull wearing a green beret. "Master Sergeant Cole Reeves," he said, extending his hand in the human greeting. My team is honored to serve alongside the Concorde fleet. Yanara took his hand carefully. Human hands were so soft compared to her armored fingers. So fragile. Yet she had seen what those hands could do. 12 soldiers, she said. The Hegemony Vanguard has 60 warships. Thousands of warriors. You understand this, yes? Reeves smiled. It was a calm, patient smile. The smile of someone who knew something that others did not. Yes, ma'am. 12 will be sufficient. Yanara wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that this was not a game. That millions of lives depended on this battle. That his 12 humans would be dust in the void within minutes of engagement. But she remembered the ambassador's words. Do not ask questions. Do not interfere. Let them work. What do you need from my fleet? She asked. Just stay out of our way, Reeves said politely. When the shooting starts, keep your ships back. Do not fire unless you absolutely have to. And whatever happens, he paused. Do not send rescue teams. We will either succeed or we will die. There is no middle ground. 3 days later, the Hegemony Vanguard arrived. 60 black warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek and deadly and silent. Their hulls swallowed light instead of reflecting it. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish. Admiral Yanara ordered her fleet into defensive positions. Her hands were steady, but her hearts were pounding. This was it. The first real battle against the invaders. If they lost here, the hegemony would have a clear path to the core worlds. She looked at her tactical display. The 12 humans had left the flagship an hour ago in a craft so small it barely registered on sensors. Where were they now? What were they doing? The hegemony fleet approached. They did not bother with communication. They did not ask for surrender. They simply advanced. Weapons charging. Then, without warning, the hegemony flagship went dark. Yanara leaned forward, confused. The massive vessel had simply stopped moving. Its running lights flickered and died. Its weapons powered down. It drifted silently, dead in space. What happened? She demanded. Before anyone could answer, a second hegemony ship went dark. Then a third. Then 5 more at once. The enemy fleet began to break formation as captains tried to understand what was happening. Panic spread through their communications. Yanara's officers intercepted fragments of their transmissions. Engineering is not responding. There are intruders in the reactor room. How did they get aboard? Our shields are still up. They are everywhere. They are. The transmission cut off. Ship after ship fell silent. Some exploded as their reactors overloaded. Others simply drifted, powerless, their crews dead or dying. The hegemony fleet had not fired a single shot at the Concorde. They had not had time. 40-7 minutes after the battle began. It was over. Yanara stared at her display in stunned silence. 60 enemy warships. All destroyed or disabled. Her fleet had not lost a single vessel. Her weapons officers had not pressed a single button. 12 humans had done this. The small craft returned to the flagship. The 12 operators walked off looking tired but calm. Some had blood on their armor. One had a bandage wrapped around his arm. But they were all alive. Yanara met them in the hangar bay. She did not know what to say. She had commanded fleets for 30 years. She had studied military tactics her entire life. Nothing had prepared her for what she had just witnessed. How? She finally asked. How is this possible? Master Sergeant Reeves set down his equipment bag. He stretched his shoulders like a man who had just finished a long day of work. We infiltrated the flagship using a stealth insertion vehicle, he said, as if describing something ordinary. The hegemony sensor systems have a gap in the lower electromagnetic frequencies. We exploited that. Once aboard, We divided into 3 teams. Alpha Team disabled the reactor. Bravo Team eliminated the command staff. Charlie Team uploaded a virus into their fleet network. The virus cascaded through all connected systems. He said it simply, calmly, like a farmer explaining how he had harvested a field. You boarded an enemy warship with active shields, Yanara said slowly. Passed through hundreds of guards. Killed their commanders. Hacked their systems. And then used that access to destroy their entire fleet. Yes, ma'am. There were 12 of you. Yes, ma'am. Yanara was quiet for a long moment. Her species had evolved to be calm and logical. They did not feel fear easily. But right now, standing before these 12 soft-skinned humans, she felt something very close to terror. What are you? She whispered. Reeves met her eyes. There was no pride in his expression. No arrogance. Just a quiet, steady certainty. We are what humanity builds when everything else fails. When normal soldiers cannot complete the mission. When the odds are impossible. He paused. We are called many things. Green Berets, SEALs, Rangers, Delta, different names for different specialties. But we all have one thing in common. What is that? He picked up his bag and walked toward the door. He stopped just before leaving and looked back over his shoulder. We do not fail. Word of the battle spread through the Concorde within hours. The humans had soldiers that made their already terrifying infantry look like children. And these 12? They were merely reconnaissance specialists. The tip of a very large and very deadly spear. The Concorde realized something important that day. For 30 years, they had been afraid of humanity. They had worried about human aggression and human weapons and human ships. They had been afraid of the wrong things. What they should have feared was what humanity kept hidden. The soldiers they never talked about. The operations that never appeared in any record. The warriors who trained in darkness and fought in silence and left nothing behind but bodies and questions. The galaxy had only seen a glimpse of what humanity could do. And somewhere in the void, the hegemony of silence was learning that they had made a terrible mistake. The hegemony of silence held an emergency council for the first time in 3,000 years. Their supreme commander was dead. Their subjugation fleet was destroyed. Their silencers had been defeated by creatures half their size. For the first time in 10 millennia, the masters of 200 worlds were afraid. Some council members argued for retreat. They had other territories, other conquests. The Concorde was not worth this cost. Better to withdraw and rebuild. But the priests spoke against this. The hegemony believed they were chosen by the gods to rule all intelligent life. Retreat would be blasphemy. It would show weakness. It would prove that the gods had abandoned them, and so they made a different choice. If humanity was the source of these demons, humanity would be destroyed. Not conquered. Not enslaved. Exterminated. Every human world burned to ash. Every human child killed before they could grow into warriors. The entire species erased from existence. They committed everything. 2,000 warships. 20 million soldiers. Every silencer who had ever been created. Every weapon in their vast arsenals. The full military might of an empire that had ruled a quarter of the galaxy. They pointed this force at one target. Earth. The Concorde learned of the attack too late. Their fleets were scattered across a dozen systems. There was no time to assemble a defense. No time to send reinforcements. Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin received the news calmly. She made a single call to Earth. "They are coming for us," she said. "All of them." The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Then it answered, "Good. We were tired of holding back." 3 days later, the hegemony fleet arrived at the Sol system. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, sensors scanning for threats. They expected desperate defenses. They expected fear. They expected a species fighting hopelessly against inevitable destruction. Instead, they found humanity waiting for them. Not the Concord, not the Allies, just humans. The defending fleet was smaller than expected. Perhaps 300 ships. The hegemony commanders smiled. 10-1 odds. Even with humanity's strange soldiers, those odds were impossible to overcome. Then they looked closer at the human ships. Something was wrong. The vessels did not match anything in hegemony records. Their configurations were different. Their energy signatures made no sense. They flew in formations that no tactical computer could predict. And they broadcast no signals, made no communications, simply waited in perfect silence. What are those ships? The fleet master demanded. His officers had no answer. They had studied humanity for months. They knew their ship designs, their weapons, their tactics. These vessels matched nothing they had seen. Then a transmission came through. It was broadcast in the clear, meant to be heard by everyone. "This is the United States Space Force Special Operations Wing," a human voice said. "We are supported by elements of the 1st Special Forces Orbital Division, the Royal Special Boat Service Void Squadron, and Spetsnaz Group Zvezda." The transmission continued. "The Russian Federation's Alpha Group and France's 1 RAPI Ma will be conducting boarding operations. Israel's Siren Matkel has already infiltrated your flagship. I suggest you check your reactor room." The fleet master spun toward his officers. "Check the reactor, now." Before anyone could respond, alarms screamed across the bridge. The reactor room was not responding. Security feeds showed bodies, human figures moving through corridors that should have been impossible to reach. The transmission was not finished. We are what humanity sends when survival is not enough. When we need to send a message. Your empire has threatened our homeworld, our families, our children. A pause. "We wanted you to understand something before the end." Another pause. "You came here thinking you were the conquerors. You were wrong. You are the lesson." The battle lasted 6 hours. It was the most one-sided engagement in recorded galactic history. The human ships moved like nothing the hegemony had ever seen. They appeared and disappeared. They struck from angles that should have been impossible. They seemed to know every move the hegemony would make before they made it. Hegemony vessels exploded. One by one, then by the dozen, then by the 100. Their weapons fired at empty space. Their shields failed against attacks they could not detect. Their crews died without understanding what was killing them. On ship after ship, human operators appeared from nowhere. They moved through corridors like ghosts. They killed with terrifying efficiency. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. The silencers tried to fight back. They were the finest warriors the hegemony had ever created. They had been built to be unbeatable. They were beaten. The human operators were smaller, weaker, slower, but they fought like nothing the silencers had ever faced. They worked in perfect teams. They exploited every weakness. They never stopped, never retreated, never gave up. One by one, the silencers fell. After 6 hours, the battle ended. Not because the hegemony surrendered. There was no one left to surrender. 2,000 warships had been reduced to debris. 20 million soldiers were dead. Every silencer had been killed. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Analysts from a dozen Concord species reviewed the battle footage in shocked silence. They ran calculations. They built models. They tried to understand what had happened. Their conclusion was terrifying. Humanity had deployed approximately 0.3% of their total special operations capability. Less than 1% thought the forces that had annihilated the greatest military assault in galactic history were just a fraction of what humanity kept in reserve. The Concord had spent 30 years fearing humanity's regular military, their infantry, their marines, their conventional forces. Now they understood the truth. Those forces existed to handle situations too trivial for humanity's real warriors. The Special Operations Forces, the operators, the quiet professionals who trained in darkness and fought in silence. They were humanity's true weapons. And they had just demonstrated what happened when those weapons were fully unleashed in the hegemony's home territory. The remaining leaders received word of the disaster. Their entire military was gone. Their silencers were extinct. Their empire was defenseless. They had attacked Earth expecting to destroy humanity. Instead, humanity had destroyed them. And now, across the cold void of space, human ships were coming. Not to negotiate, not to demand surrender. They were coming to finish what the hegemony had started. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years had less than a week to live, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The hegemony of silence had ruled their part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered 200 star systems and destroyed any species that resisted. They had never known true defeat. When their vanguard fleet was destroyed at Varth, they did not retreat. They did not negotiate. Instead, they sent the subjugation fleet, 800 warships, 3 million soldiers, and the silencers. The silencers were the hegemony's own elite forces. They were warriors who had been modified since birth. Their bones were replaced with metal. Their muscles were enhanced with synthetic fibers. Their minds were connected to computers that made them faster, stronger, and deadlier than any natural being. They had conquered 100 worlds and never lost a single battle. The Concord Council received reports of the approaching fleet with despair. This was not a vanguard. This was an extinction force. The hegemony was done testing. They meant to end the war with a single overwhelming strike. Ambassador Chen Wei-lin listened to the reports calmly. When the council finished speaking, she stood up. Humanity will provide additional support, she said. What kind of support? Admiral Yanara asked. After Vareth, she had learned to take human promises seriously. A SEAL team for naval operations. A company of rangers for ground combat. Chun paused. And one operator from our Tier 1 Special Missions Unit. The council was silent. One soldier? Against 3 million? I do not understand, Velthari said carefully. One operator? The hegemony supreme commander will be at the battle, Chun explained. He always leads major operations personally. Our intelligence indicates he will establish a command center on Harath IV, the ocean world in the target system. The single operator will handle him. Handle him. Yanara repeated. You mean assassinate him? Chen Wei-lin nodded. Yes, while the SEALs and Rangers keep the enemy occupied, the operator will remove the head of the snake. The Battle of Harath IV began 3 days later. The SEALs arrived first. There were 40 of them. They came in underwater insertion vehicles that could operate at depths no other species could survive. Harath IV was mostly ocean, and the hegemony had built shipyards and fuel depots on artificial platforms across its surface. The SEALs slipped beneath the waves and disappeared. For 2 days, nothing happened. The hegemony forces built their defenses. They prepared their fleet. They brought down 3 million soldiers to secure the planet. They believed they were safe. They were wrong. On the 3rd day, things started to break. A fuel depot exploded in the southern hemisphere. Then another. Then 3 more. The hegemony sent investigators. They found nothing. No evidence of bombs. No sign of attackers. Just destruction and death. The SEALs struck shipyards next. They rose from the ocean in the dead of night, killed everyone inside, planted explosives, and vanished back beneath the waves before anyone could respond. Hegemony admirals found their vessels sinking without ever seeing an enemy. Where are they coming from? The hegemony commander screamed, "Find them! Kill them! But you cannot kill, you cannot find." And the SEALs had been trained to be ghosts. While the Navy fell into chaos, the Rangers hit the ground. 200 of them landed on the northern continent. Their mission was simple: hold a strategic ridge that overlooked the Supreme Commander's bunker. Hold it long enough for the single operator to complete her mission. The hegemony sent 10,000 soldiers to take the ridge. The Rangers killed the first wave before it reached their lines. They killed the second wave in close combat when ammunition ran low. They killed the third wave with bayonets and knives and bare hands. The hegemony sent 20,000 more, then 50,000. They used artillery. They used poison gas. They used weapons that melted rock and boiled air. The Rangers did not retreat. Night fell. The hegemony assumed the humans would be exhausted. They sent their silencers. 500 of the cybernetic warriors advanced in perfect formation, confident that nothing biological could stop them. The Rangers were waiting. The battle lasted 4 hours. When dawn came, the ridge was still in human hands. 400 silencers lay dead in the valley. The surviving 100 retreated for the first time in their existence. The Rangers had lost soldiers. Many were wounded. Some were dying. But they were still there, still holding, still fighting. And as the sun rose, they began to sing. It was a strange song. An old song. A song about soldiers who never gave up and never surrendered. The hegemony forces heard it and felt something they had never felt before. Fear. While all this happened, the single operator moved through the shadows. Her name was classified. Her face was classified. Her entire existence was classified. She was simply called the Asset. She had trained for 15 years for missions exactly like this. The Supreme Commander's bunker was buried deep underground. 17 levels of security protected it. 400 guards patrolled its corridors. Sensors covered every inch. Defense systems could kill anything that moved without authorization. She passed through all of it. She moved like smoke, like a whisper, like death itself. Guards died without ever seeing her face. Security systems failed seconds before she reached them. Locked doors opened as if by magic. Level after level, she descended. Body after body, she left behind. Finally, she reached the command chamber. The Supreme Commander sat on a throne of black metal, surrounded by his generals. He was massive, even for his species. 9 feet tall, covered in armor that had deflected plasma and railguns and everything else the galaxy had thrown at him. He looked up as the door opened. His eyes widened. A human woman stood in the doorway. She was covered in blood that was not her own. In her hands, she held a knife and a pistol. "Who are you?" The Supreme Commander demanded. "I am a message," she said quietly. "From humanity to you." "A message?" He laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "You are nothing. One small creature against the might of an empire. You cannot kill me. You cannot even hurt me." The woman did not argue. She simply moved. What happened next was not recorded clearly. The security footage shows only fragments. Shadows and flashes and bodies falling. The Supreme Commander's personal guards, each one a veteran of 100 battles, died in seconds. His generals tried to flee and fell before they reached the door. The Supreme Commander himself lasted longer. He was strong and fast, and his armor was the finest his empire could build. It was not enough. When the footage cleared, the woman stood alone in a room full of corpses. The Supreme Commander lay at her feet, his throat cut. She walked to the communication console and began transmitting. Coordinates. Fleet positions. Command codes. Everything the Concord needed to destroy the hegemony force. Then she walked out the front door of the bunker. 400 guards had protected that bunker. She had killed them all on the way in. There was no one left to stop her leaving. The Battle of Hereth the Fourth ended that day. The hegemony fleet, receiving no orders, fell into confusion. The Concord forces struck while they were paralyzed. Within hours, the entire subjugation fleet was destroyed. The hegemony had sent their best, their elite, their finest warriors and greatest commanders. Humanity had sent 40 SEALs, 200 Rangers, and one woman with a knife. The woman won, and somewhere in the hegemony's home territory, leaders who had ruled for 10,000 years looked at the reports and understood that they had awakened something terrible. The war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. The hegemony of silence surrendered unconditionally. There was no negotiation, no discussion. Their remaining leaders simply broadcast a message of complete submission and begged for mercy. An empire that had ruled for 10,000 years collapsed in less than 2 weeks. The surrender was accepted aboard the former hegemony flagship, now controlled by human forces. A joint task force of elite operators from 12 Earth nations stood witness. They wore the uniforms of their respective countries. American SEALs, British SAS, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli CRA, French Commandos, German KSK, Australian SASR, and others whose names and nations remain classified. They stood in perfect silence as the hegemony's last surviving council members knelt before them. The Concord watched these events with a mixture of relief and terror. They were grateful that the war was over. They were grateful that humanity had saved them. But they were also deeply, fundamentally afraid. They had seen what humanity could do. Ambassador Velthari requested a private meeting with the human delegation. She needed to understand. She needed to make sense of what had happened. She needed to know if the galaxy should fear its new protectors as much as it had feared its would-be conquerors. Chen Wei-Lin agreed to meet her. They sat in a small conference room, aboard a human vessel. The room was simple. Plain walls, basic furniture. Nothing to suggest that this ship had helped destroy the most powerful military force in known history. Why? Velthari finally asked. Her 4 eyes studied the human woman carefully. Why do you create such warriors? What drives your species to build these weapons? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. You have studied our history, she said. You know what we have done to each other. Velthari nodded slowly. She had read the reports. The wars, the genocides, the atomic bombs dropped on civilian cities, the death camps, the ethnic cleansings. Humanity's history was written in blood. You know what we are capable of, Chung continued. The cruelty, the evil, the terrible things we have done to our own kind. She met Velthari's eyes without flinching. We know it too. We have lived it, survived it, learned from it. She stood and walked to the window. Earth hung in the void outside, blue and green and fragile. Those soldiers you fear? The ones who destroyed the hegemony. They do not fight because they love war. They do not kill because they enjoy killing. She turned back to face Velthari. They fight because they love what they protect. Every one of them has a home, a family, children, parents, something precious that they would die to defend. That is what makes them terrifying, Velthari said slowly. Yes, Chun nodded. They are not mindless weapons. They are parents and siblings and friends. They coach children's sports teams. They attend birthday parties. They read bedtime stories to their sons and daughters. And then, when their world is threatened, they put on their armor and become something else entirely. She sat back down across from Velthari. We created our elite forces not because we wanted to conquer the galaxy. We created them because we never wanted to be helpless again. We have seen what happens when good people cannot defend themselves. We have buried too many innocent dead. We will not let it happen again. Not to us. Not to anyone." Balthari considered this for a long moment. "And now that the threat is gone, what will these warriors do?" Chen smiled. It was a sad smile. A tired smile. "They will go home," she said. "They will hold their children. They will try to sleep without nightmares. They will sit at dinner tables and smile at jokes and pretend to be normal. They will carry the weight of what they have done so that others do not have to." That sounds. Balthari searched for the right word. Lonely. It is, Chen agreed. The best warriors always walk alone. They see things that others cannot imagine. They do things that others could never do. And they bear that burden in silence so that the people they love can live in peace. The meeting ended soon after. Balthari returned to the Concord Council with her report. She told them what she had learned. She told them about humanity's history of violence. She told them about the warriors who fought not for glory but for love. The council listened carefully. When she finished, they made a decision. Humanity would be welcomed as a full member of the Concord. More than that, they would be given a special role. A new provision was added to the Concord Charter. It was called the Guardian Clause. Any species facing extinction could request humanity's aid. There were no restrictions, no limitations, no bureaucratic approval processes. If a species was dying, they could call for help, and humanity would answer. Some council members worried that this gave humanity too much power, that it made them the galaxy's police force, that it was dangerous to trust so much to a species with such a violent history. Chen Weilin responded to these concerns simply. "We do not want power," she said. "We do not want control. We want only one thing, to ensure that what happened to so many species on Earth never happens to anyone else. Genocide, extinction, conquest. These things are unacceptable. If we can stop them, we will. If we cannot, we will die trying." The Guardian Clause was approved. In the centuries that followed, it was invoked 17 times. 17 species faced destruction. 17 times they called for help. 17 times humanity's elite forces answered. They came from the shadows. They fought in the darkness. They asked for nothing in return except the chance to protect the innocent. The Kreth world was saved from a plague engineered by terrorists. Human medics and operators worked together to find a cure and hunt down those responsible. The Velith faced a religious war that threatened to tear their civilization apart. Human negotiators and special forces worked in tandem to end the fighting and bring PESCEA, rogue artificial intelligence, tried to exterminate 3 species in the Outer Rim: human, cyber warfare specialists, and combat operators shut it down in a campaign that lasted 7 months. Each time, humanity's warriors did what they had always done. They trained. They prepared. They fought. They won. And when the battle was over, they went home. The galaxy learned to sleep peacefully, knowing that somewhere in the void, humanity's elite forces kept watch. They were protectors now. Guardians, the shield that stood between civilization and the darkness. The things that lurked in the dark spaces between stars learned something too. They learned that there were certain worlds you did not threaten, certain species you did not attack. Because if you did, if you crossed certain lines, then quiet humans in simple uniforms would come for you, and they would not stop until the threat was eliminated. The galaxy had once feared humanity for their violence, for their aggression, for their terrible history of war and destruction. Now they understood the truth. Humanity's capacity for violence was not a curse. It was a gift. A terrible, beautiful gift that they used to protect those who could not protect themselves. The soldiers did not fight for glory. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for the child who could sleep safely because someone stood watch in the night. They fought for the parent who could raise their family without fear. They fought for the future that every species deserved, but few could claim on their own. They were humanity's elite. The quiet professionals. The guardians of the galaxy. And the darkness learned to fear the silence, because sometimes the silence meant they were coming. And when humanity's warriors came, the darkness died.